Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today, hosted by Propel. The topic is delivering efficiency, productivity, and sustainability in the ag and food ecosystem. And my name is Li-Sheng Wang. I'm one of the co-founders and also the head of platform operations investments at Propel. Propel is one of the leading online investment platforms for accredited investors. We're trying to make venture investing more accessible to accredited investors, and sustainability, ag, and food tech investment has been a pretty important track on Propel, and we're constantly actively looking for investment opportunities in the area. And today, we are thrilled to have an excellent panel of speakers today, from former public listed company CEO to entrepreneur who is scaling and commercializing their new technology, as well as co-managing directors from one of the leading agriculture and food tech consulting firm. So before I introduce the panel speakers, I just wanted to kind of just talk about the logistics of the call today. And we have a lot of topics to cover, and it's going to take about 30 to 40 minutes to go through all these topics. After that, we're going to go into the Q&A section. Hopefully, it's going to be interactive audience that we can address your questions. During the initial discussion for the first 30 to 40 minutes, anytime you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A box to put in your questions. But in terms of addressing these questions, we're going to leave for the back half of the event to get your questions. And these questions will be answered first come, first served basis. So whenever you have a question, use the Q&A box to put in the questions for us to address later on. So that said, this webinar is also recorded. So for entrepreneurs or investors who are interested in the topic but otherwise not able to join today, they can play the recording and listen to the expertise and the knowledges from our great speakers. Now, without further ado, I'm going to dive into the introduction. There's no particular order, just from the left to right. I'm going to go introduce each panel speaker. First of all, Angela Setas. And she is the Chief Commercial Officer at True Algae. True Algae actually is a portfolio company of Propel. And Angela initially served as an advisory capacity with True Algae, but eventually joined the company in March 2020. Angela has over 30 years of management experience and over 20 years in commercializing high-value products from algae, where she brings expertise in biotechnology, sales, and marketing. Angela is a former senior executive at MarTech Biosciences, a formerly NASDAQ-listed leading microbial manufacturer, where she managed the commercial team, resulting in over $400 million in annual sales. MarTech, arguably the most successful algae company to date, was later acquired by international life sciences and materials conglomerate DSM for over $1 billion. In addition to her experience at MarTech, Angela has worked with several startup companies using various microbial technologies for health and wellness of people and planet. And move on to Dr. Pam Marone. Dr. Marone spent her 30-plus year career focused on biological products for pest management and plant health. And she is one of the only 32 women founders to have taken her company public. Dr. Marone was formerly the CEO of Marone Bio Innovations, a company she started in 2006 that was formerly listed on NASDAQ and later acquired by Biomakers Crop Solutions, another NASDAQ-listed crop productivity solutions company. She currently serves on the boards of NASDAQ-listed 180 life sciences and a few private AgTech and bio companies such as Stem Express and Fermentation, most founded by or led by women founders. Pam is also a board member of the Association for Women in Science and a board member of the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and also a past alumni trustee of Cornell University. She has a bachelor's degree in entomology from Cornell University and also a PhD from NC State in entomology. Next up, move on to Robin Ross. Robin Ross is managing partner at AgNexus Consulting that provides both technical and precision market strategy development for AgTech and food tech companies. She has over 20 years of success developing market-leading product offerings in the agriculture business industry. She leverages her background as a leading strategic scientist to consult on effective sales enablement and target marketing strategies, especially for new product launches. Robin is a compelling public speaker and technical writer who translates complex scientific idea into engaging presentations, marketing education materials, and sales training tools that connect with all audiences. Robin has a Master's of Science degree in plant pathology from Clemson University and a bachelor's degree in biology from Mars Hill College. Last but not least, Annalisa Williams is a managing director at AgNexus Consulting. She has over 15 years of experience launching new technologies, creating strategic marketing and sales direction, and compellingly communicating the value of unique technologies to diverse grower communities. Crafting focused, solution-centric messaging that resonates with key market decision makers is a core talent for Annalisa. Prior to co-founding AgNexus Consulting, Annalisa worked for Acadian Plant Health, building and managing its specialty crop grower portfolio. Annalisa is a California Polytechnic State University San Luis Obispo graduate, earning her bachelor's degree in agribusiness and master's in agriculture science. I'm really excited to working with a great panel of speakers today. And let's move on quickly to a lot of topics we have to cover today. So this slide basically shows, I guess, a trendy topic on everyone's mind, especially in 2022, which is inflation. Aside from gas, I guess, you know, the sharply increased inflation rate has a lot to do with the increasing prices in food and fertilizer. On the left-hand side, we see a lot of these items when you go to grocery shopping and keep going up, right? And it seems gas price has come down, but the food price has not. And on the right-hand side, we also, a lot of people probably follow the fertilizer price very closely as well, especially if you are in the agriculture space. And even before, I think a couple shocks, from the Ukraine war, as well as, China stopped fertilizer exports back in 2021, we already see the fertilizer price kind of start going up. So there's a lot of, I think, things that has been fairly sticky in terms of the food and prices that we're experiencing as consumers. And so the natural question to our audience and to our panel speakers is really what are some of the key drivers of inflation in the food and ag sectors? There are some obvious ones we just talked about, the shock, for example, the Ukraine war, things like that, but also there are a lot of probably non-obvious ones. Can you please talk about some of these drivers you see? And Pam, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, 80% of all chemical pesticides are generic. That means they're off patent. And so therefore, most of them are sourced from China. And with the COVID disruptions and lockdowns, it's been very difficult to get normal traffic back and forth between there's so many raw materials as well as finished pesticides that are shipped from and exported from China for the pesticide market and also the fertilizer market. So that's a big one. Second, of course, is the war in Ukraine. That affected my former company, Marone Bio, pretty severely because we had bought a unit in Finland that has a biofertilizer product, and they had sales in Ukraine, which stopped. And then also we had some manufacturing in Russia, and had to quickly relocate that inventory. And then in our fermentation tanks, we use various agricultural raw materials to make the ferment the microbes. And it's been really hard finding some of those normal ingredients that we'd always find, but sourcing them, there's shortages and then high prices. So two major things are the war and then COVID and the after effects of COVID from China.
Right. Thank you, Pam. And Lisa, I think you have some insight in this as well. I think aside from what Pam had talked about, can you elaborate on your views on this?
100%. Yes. So Pam, I think you're 100% correct with, from a manufacturer perspective and these inputs and some of the challenges that came. When we go a little bit further down the distribution channel and we start talking about the distributors or the people that actually get the products into the hands of the growers, there are some similar challenges, not only from inputs, basic chemical fertilizers, basic chemicals that are being used for pest control, up 9 to 15%. And those would be the generics and off labels, but then also fertilizer prices, 300% spikes for nitrogen and some potash. For the most part, phosphorus was a little bit less because of perhaps location of the raw resource. Now, there's a couple of other key things that come into play here too. Availability of labor and the effects of COVID on labor, definitely something that a lot of growers have struggled with. Having people in the field to be able to harvest crops, having people there to be able to drive trucks to get product from the field to different distribution sites. And then from there, having trucks be able to distribute food across country. So definitely some chinks in the armor there in food distribution. And then I think also a couple of other things that come into play, depending on what geography you're in, regulation and the cost of regulation and a lot of regulatory changes, especially on the West Coast and on a lot of the specialty crop markets. Those regulatory costs and perhaps hindrances to mass production coming into play. And I also think energy cost of fuel, of course, we're starting to see that level out, but still higher than a lot of points pre-COVID. So definitely more than fertilizer cost driving inflation in this sector.
Well, thank you so much. I love the responses from, I think, a geopolitical kind of conflicts to, I think, a supply chain issues and as well as, some of the regulatory issues. I believe some of these things are a little bit out of our control, right? For example, the war situation and, maybe the regulatory process. I think it's a little bit out of hand unless, you're activist or something like that. But are there anything that you guys have seen from your vantage point that have been something that the country, right, the US, as well as globally, have started to work on some of the solutions to address these issues? I'll probably go back to Annalisa. You can start maybe addressing.
Sure. There's lots of different legislation that's out there to try and solve the labor issue. Whether or not the right solutions are on the table, that's yet to be seen. But I think that that's a big piece that needs to be solved to help streamline just ag production in general. What is nice is there is a lot of emphasis on new and green technologies and grants and funding that's out there and available to companies that have unique technologies to be able to further amplify their research, their development, and get those into the hands of growers and get technologies that can easily be integrated into cultural practices in the field. So there's definitely an emphasis towards that, and I hope that we continue to see that.
So there are regulatory potential kind of tailwinds, as well as I think you're talking about technological innovations that could potentially drive efficiency. Pam, do you have?
Yeah, I can pop in here and talk about. So Western Growers Center for Innovation is tackling the labor by really focusing on automation. So they had a request for proposals and calling all innovators and to really automate and and that means robots and other automation. So that's a big initiative out here in the West. And then, we're seeing growers coping by cutting rates of fertilizer and then seeing that in some cases, they don't see any effect on crop yields. And we're seeing a lot of growers actually start for the first time or increasing their uses of biologicals, because biostimulants and bionutrients can be very cost efficient and give an ROI and reduce the amount of chemical fertilizer. So while the prices are really high in chemicals, then that's benefiting the biological sector on that front.
And I would just add to that too, that from a field perspective and talking with some key contacts that are there in the heart of specialty crop production in California, the people who were innovators from the beginning, who were already playing around with biologicals, biofertilizers, and so on and so forth, they're excelling at this point, right? They were ahead of the curve and really prepared to weather the storm that we're experiencing right now. And you're starting to see a lot of kind of secondary adopters really opening their eyes to opportunities that are out there. And I'm going to say a non-traditional ag fertilizer space. It's exciting.
Yes, regenerative ag has gotten a push because you don't use those kinds of crop inputs. That's right.
Yes. Precision agriculture, a little bit more focused on the technology side of things. That's going to play a huge role in the success of agriculture within the United States and really globally in the next 5 to 10 years. That would be different technologies like drone technology, or as Pam mentioned, automation when it comes to harvesting. These types of things are going to be key.
Right. Thank you very much. And Lisa, you early on talked about the supply chain distribution issues here, which plays a role of driving the inflation further up. Do you see the onshoring kind of efforts? I think a lot of different industries. Do you think that effort overall will help kind of alleviate some of the burdens on the supply chain?
Perhaps. I think that we still have a ways to go in solving some of these different challenges that are there. But the leaders and the innovators in the industry, I see them making efforts to look at any and all opportunities to make efficiencies come to be.
Right. And I'm not exactly sure if you guys follow the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And is there any component in that regulation will potentially help, I think, the growers in terms of addressing, I think, the food prices issues and help these growers to maybe cut their costs?
Well, there's quite a bit in there for ag. There's 20+ billion or more, and so there's quite a bit in there for ag, and I think ag was pretty happy with what they got from that bill.
Having a seat at the table and being noticed, right? That's important. And I think the recognition with these kind of different setbacks that have happened, that this can ultimately affect and does really affect food security globally, coming back and making those efforts to try and solve some of those things. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Well said. I think, not everything is, bad news, right? There's some great news, which, look at the chart on page 5 here. First of all, on the left-hand side, what you can see is actually kind of a really steep kind of, curve going north with a lot of funding, right, into ag and food tech venture deals. And on the right-hand side, this is basically funding goes into food and agriculture, VC and private equity funds. So in a nutshell, there's a lot of money, I would say, in the past several years, right? This is not just 2021, but if you look at the curve, it's all going north, right? Pretty steeply. So I guess the bottom line here is there has been a lot of investments, maybe not 2022 because of the liquidity dry out. But if you look at over the past maybe several years or even 10 years, there's a lot of money goes into supporting agriculture and food tech innovations. So, and the next slide shows, this is an eye chart. I'm not expecting you to read very carefully about all the numbers and sectors, but the bottom line here is even in 2021, 1 year, there's been more than 600 deals in the venture space and private equity space done with more than 12 billion that goes into innovation. So the natural question, right, that we want to ask, especially from your guys' vintage point, and there must be opportunities when there's a crisis. And I think both Annalisa and Pam have mentioned briefly about innovation, the role of innovation plays in, the common, I think, understanding is most technology innovation are deflationary, right? That brings deflationary forces to the price stability and things like that. So what are some of the innovation you guys seen from your vantage point in the past few years that you think could help alleviate some of the price burdens in the agriculture and food industry? Maybe Robin and Lisa from the consultant, you guys work with smaller and medium size as well as big conglomerate in food and ag. You guys must have seen a lot of interesting, exciting opportunities here. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, for sure. I'll mention three that I think are particularly cool. Two of them are AI types of technologies. So the first would be biomakers. Without a doubt, I think these guys are going to play a role in efficient farming. They gene sequence soil samples, and then they're using AI technology to predict the functionality of the microbes that are in that soil sample. So, for example, they might determine that a grower's lacking microbes that would solubilize bound phosphorus from the soil, so the crop can't get it. And so once that's determined, the grower can choose to use a microbial solution that would solubilize that phosphorus rather than simply adding more phosphorus fertilizer. So that's just an example. Biomakers examines multiple parameters, that's like 30 of them, that could influence the grower's purchases and practices. And furthermore, this kind of technology offers the ability for that grower to actually track the input of crop inputs and truly create measurable sustainability types of programs. The downside, that's giving a grower so much information that some of them look at those reports and they're like, holy cow, what do I do with all of that? It's almost like a head. So I'll give you the opposite here is pattern ag. They're also using genetic technologies, but they've smartly narrowed it down so they measure only parameters that could immediately impact a grower's cropping decisions. So this would be, they're going to look at a soil sample, they're going to use some genetic testing, but they're looking specifically for things that a grower can take action on immediately, like corn rootworms, soybean cyst nematodes, and then they could immediately decide what kind of seeds do they want. Should they spend more money on seeds that have resistance to some of these, or should they buy seed treatments or other kinds of chemical crop inputs? They may be able to save money and kind of streamline their operation by only buying what they truly need. So pattern ag has done a really good job of using good technology and making it super applicable to what a grower's doing and can make decisions right now. Mm-hmm. The third I'll mention, this one's kind of unique too, is a company called Myland. It's an in-field microalgae fermentation. So they go to a grower's field and they isolate specific microalgae from a grower's field, and then they multiply that local species on the site and return it to the field. So these microbes or microalgae they've been shown to enhance soil structure, build carbon, improve water holding capacity, and all of these kinds of things have the potential to help growers be more efficient with their growing practices and target their fertilizer decisions, which for now, fertilizers is pretty expensive. So there's three that I think are pretty cool.
Thank you, Robin. It sounds like if you're an entrepreneur in the audience, it seems like there is an opportunity to have a software company that can explain all these analysis or produce some actionable insights for growers, because obviously most of growers, I don't know how tax heavy they are. If they are not, then there's an opportunity maybe to put numbers and data that collected from these precision sensing companies or agriculture companies to distill into kind of actionable items for the growers to act on. So it sounds like there's opportunity there.
Absolutely. If there were a program that now said, what do I do? That would be awesome.
Yes.
Right. And Alyssa, you have anything to add here?
There's one company in particular, and I think, to kind of elaborate on what Robin said, each of the companies that she presented really had a tool that solved an issue. right? And I think that a lot of the times we'll have new technologies approach us and they'll have something really cool, but they don't know exactly how their product fits into the market and really what problem they can solve for the grower community. An example or another example of one of these companies that's really hit the nail on the head is called Heart Bio. And they have a biological herbicide that they have developed. When we think about cultural practices, a lot of times in organics, there needs to be a cover crop that's included in their production practices. And so one of the challenges, especially if someone is doing no-till, which means that they're not going in and mechanically modifying the soil, right? They're not using equipment to break apart the soil. If they're not doing that, they have this gorgeous cover crop, right? That's there doing good things in the soil, but now they have to plant seeds or plant plants into this already thriving cover crop. And that can be challenging to have a small seed sprout and go. So to have a technology that can be used in the organic space that can help with burn down or removal, at least of the top, right, of these different cover crops that they're using, what an awesome solution, especially if it has good efficacy.
Yeah, definitely very exciting. Pam, you've been an entrepreneur yourself, right? And also you are advising a number of AgTech companies. Do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I'm seeing quite a big trend in waste to fertilizer startups and taking either food waste or manure and converting it into a higher value product. So for example, Chonex is taking chicken manure in the Southeast and converting it via black soldier flies and then creating a granule fertilizer, but they're actually doing real-time compost tea production on farm and then delivering it to the growers and enhancing soil health. And the data is impressive, very impressive on the yield and quality benefits, as well as the change in and improvement in soil health. And then there's quite a few of the food waste also to fertilizer, like a new one, Nurture Growth and California Safe Soil out here, and others. And so growers are looking at those products and saying, I can cut my rates of fertilizer and also boost my yields. And then on the very high tech side, I'm seeing a lot of companies with new molecules or new compounds, peptides or pheromones. So for example, Inatrix, company I advise, is developing two products, one RNAi for soybean cyst nematode, and then a peptide platform for some serious plant diseases. And then Illicit Plant has some plant sterol compounds that can dramatically reduce crop stress in times of drought. Pheronym which is another company I advise, is developing pheromones that are produced by nematodes, the first ever, and applied to soil to control soil pests. So just when I think it's getting so crowded, which is very crowded with so many startups, there's always some entrepreneur startup that's coming up with something actually a bit different. The key here is, does it offer the value to the growers? Does it have a good return on investment? And those still are always going to be the fundamental questions, no matter how sexy the technology is.
Yeah, well, thank you all for these wonderful answers. I think, Angela, the next question naturally comes to you. I believe the other panelists also kind of saved that biostimulant space for you. I haven't heard a lot of the talks about innovation in that space. Can you maybe just chime in here and comment on what are some of the interesting innovations? Of course, True Algae is one of those, but if you can maybe just look at the landscape and talk about that kind of overall picture of what are some of the interesting innovations in the space.
Yes, so for me, what I see and what I'm paying a lot of attention to is microbials and products that support microbials. So this, the soil, much like our human gut, has a microbiome, and the healthier that microbiome is, the better the crop's going to perform. So there's a lot of work being done in producing the right microbes for the soil type and injecting them. Where True Solum, our product, comes in, is it's a metabolite that supports those microbes, particular microbes in the microbiome, and helps with them to do their job, mostly to help release trapped nutrients in the soil that can be used by the crop, or to help the inoculants of these microbes perform better. So we work a lot in that space in understanding the microbiome in the soil and how to support it.
Thank you. It sounds like there's a lot of, I think, overlap or just crossover, kind of a spillover technology from life sciences, right, or synthetic biology to ag and food tech. Across the board, I heard from Robin and Lisa and Pam about precision ag, right? It almost sounds to me like a precision medicine, right? We heard about these personalized cancer therapies where they take cells out of the patient and re-engineer and put it back, right, to use to fight whatever disease it is. And on the biostimulant side, right, I heard, basically using maybe AI or some machine learning or things like that to kind of understanding kind of the nuances in different functionalities from different fungi or algae and things like that, to be able to kind of precisely help different crops, which is kind of very, very interesting trend. Do you guys see actually a lot of these companies have cross-disciplinary kind of entrepreneurs working together to bring these technologies to the market?
Well, I'll just mention one. There is a convergence of precision technology and pest management and plant health companies. So in order to use and practice integrated pest management, crop production better, the precision tech companies are converging with the IPM companies. And for example, Root Applied Sciences is doing real-time PCR. That means that she could identify real-time in the field exactly when a fungal spore that causes a downy mildew of lettuce or powdery mildew of grapes, and then the farmer can time their sprays much better, and then it reduces the number of chemical sprays. So it's just an example of how precision technology can really benefit the grower and is part of the IPM system now.
Got it. So now let's dive a little bit deeper into biostimulant, because we have an expert here, Angela, and she's commercializing the technology True Solum from Tree Algae. And this is kind of an overview, right, of what the market look like, and it's expected to grow into more than 5.6 billion market in 2026. And there's a lot of exciting innovation, as Angela has talked about early on in this space. Maybe we can just dive into this a little bit. But before I actually go in these questions, one thing I do want to remind our audience is that a lot of the companies, I think the audience, the speakers mentioned, we don't have a relationship with these companies, at least Propel doesn't. Maybe some of the panelists are working with them. And this does not constitute any investing advice, just so you know. And the True Algae is indeed a Propel portfolio company. So with that out of the way, let's maybe get into the biostimulant innovations. So the first question is how do companies like True Algae, right, help solve some of the issues that we discussed above, which is kind of can companies like True Algae with their product help bringing some deflationary kind of pressure to prices overall for food and ag? And how do you do that? Through what mechanism do you think that can potentially bring down the food price?
Well, with what True Algae does in our product True Solum, it helps to use nutrients that may already be prevalent in the soil, and therefore could reduce the need for other inputs. So in that way, it becomes a more efficient machinery, in that the soil is doing what it should be doing and what it was designed to do from the beginning of time, and that's to feed the plant. So we've with that through some of the chemistry that we've applied or through poor water quality, a variety of different inputs that have over time degenerated our soil, and to bring the soil back to life and make that microbiome healthy is going to create more of a natural process, restoring that cycle of feeding the plant.
Right. The next question is not here, but it's more like a follow-up question, right? I think a lot of farmers or growers intuitively they know, the newly or organic or natural biostimulant is better for their crop, and it's designed to improve yields and increase shelf life of their produce. But historically, there has been a cost issue, right? I think if fertilizer is something they know, chemical fertilizer, and it's relatively cost effective. And what are some of the things that panelists that you guys see that really helps us to scale the production and make sure that new innovation, new product can be as cost competitive as the traditional chemical fertilizers?
Well, I can speak about algae in particular. The bigger the scale, the lower cost it is to grow. Our system is super efficient in that it's a closed system. We know what goes into the system, what comes out of the system. We actually don't use the algae biomass as part of that equation, which has historically been a challenge for cost effectiveness with algae production is to get that biomass up to a certain density. Instead, we use the metabolites the algae produces and expresses into the water. So, I'm kind of answering your next question about how we're different, but by doing that, we're able to scale very effectively because we can harvest every day, and our product being that metabolite-rich water. So the more we produce, our main cost is labor. So the more we can produce with that same labor, the lower our cost becomes.
Right. Can you also comment a little bit about your differentiation from some of the competitors out there in the biostimulant space?
Sure. So I started to talk about this a little bit. We're a lot of farmers or companies that we approach view us as another algae product in the market, but actually we're derived from algae and we contain no algae. This product, True Solum, is the metabolites the algae expresses while it grows. So we grow up the algae, we separate the algae biomass from the water it grows in, and that water it grows in is rich in these metabolites. These metabolites are small molecules that are terrific at signaling microbes, initially algae, but also work with other microbes in the soil, single cell organisms, to better communicate, help with the communication between the soil and the plant so that the plant gets what it needs from the soil. So the major difference is that we're not trying to grow algae, we're trying to get the metabolites from the algae, and that's a much more efficient process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, can you talk about maybe a little bit climate impact of the True Algae's product versus traditional kind of chemical product? Because I think that is a big tailwind for a lot of new breed, these natural organic biostimulant products, right?
Well, first of all, our production is very earth friendly. All we use is sunlight and some micronutrients and water and CO2. So we're not using electric lights to illuminate the algae and help it grow. We use the sun. Our facility right now is in Florida, although it could be anywhere that there's a little sunshine, and the algae grows. So that's a very earth-friendly process. Beyond that, when it comes to agriculture, it works with what's naturally in the soil. If there's enough microbial content in the soil, in some cases there isn't, and that's when you need an inoculum. But if there's some microbial content in the soil, our product will work with that and make that product more robust in, in promoting the release of nutrients into for the plant. By doing that, it eliminates the need for, or reduces the need for adding those nutrients on top. In a case in point is iron. There are 30% of the farmlands in the world have problems with iron, whether it's a high pH soil where the iron's trapped, or the water quality is poor and traps the iron in the soil. The regular treatment is to put iron on top, and we all know that mining iron and getting that iron ore from the earth isn't so earth friendly. So here we are with a closed system that doesn't interfere with the environment, producing something that can release what's naturally already in that soil.
Thank you, Angela.
I'll mention, just add something to here, that increasingly companies are hiring third parties, like I'll mention one, which is Boundless, to do a life cycle analysis on their products. We did that at Marone Bio for 3 biological products for pest management, and found an 80 to 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emission and carbon footprint compared to their chemical counterparts. So increasingly, they're going to seek data coming out of this industry, and companies like True Algae with that data. And hopefully over time, then the better outcomes that we're getting with these types of biologicals, farmers will be able to get payments for it. And that's certainly our goal.
Yeah, I think I would just pass on to Robin, because I think, you like to talk about science in a very kind of easy language for audience who's layman to understand. So we all kind of know that, chemical fertilizer, mankind was able to kind of produce this out of air, right? And it's really cost effective and it's abundant. But during the course of using these chemical fertilizers, it also causes huge greenhouse gas issues. Can you maybe explain to audience who's not necessarily scientific to understand, why there's a need to, to create kind of new innovations like what True Algae is doing?
Yeah, well, I will use the specific example of True Algae, where I want to go in a little more technical detail on how it works. True Algae is a metabolite from the chlorella. That metabolite is signaling key kinds of bacteria that produce siderophores. Siderophores are chelating agents that bind up with the iron and make it so that the plant can take it up. So that means, just like Angela said, all of the environmental issues associated with iron can be bypassed, because now the crop is it's easier for the crop to use what's naturally there. What they used to do, having to mine iron, put it into formats that you could put out into the field, was messy. Growers didn't like doing it. You have the mining situation. It might even be environmentally problematic. It probably is. So now this simple little chlorella metabolite, it's non-toxic, easy to use, effectively could change this entire picture to where plants get what they need. And there's no environmental consequences really to this. And some of the crops that are most impacted would be rice. And that's sort of a global staple crop that's particularly influenced by iron deficiencies. So there's an example, but I think a lot of these biologicals work in a similar way, where the environmental cost to making them is very small. Where multiplying microbes or things of that nature, the environmental cost is very small. The environmental gain can be huge.
Thank you. Before we move on to maybe the audience questions, one final question I think a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience probably care about, especially in the ag space, is how do companies like True Algae, right, in the ag and food space, to scale its sales? Because we all know, I think, there are small, medium-sized farmers and growers, and they're not necessarily tech savvy, and they're risk averse as well. And large corporations have their own problems in terms of sales cycle and things like that. And Lisa, do you want to comment on, how do you guys help ag tech companies to effectively scale their sales?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you hit on a very important point. There's a couple of different factors that are going to come into play here. Number one, and I've said this word today, efficacy. We need to be able to prove out efficacy, that it's actually doing what it says it's going to do. And at the end of the day, considering all of the costs that come into the product. So that's the purchasing of the product, the application of the product, all of these different types of things, we still have at least a 3-to-1 ROI. That's kind of a benchmark in the field. The other thing that's really important, though, is, growers are juggling a lot of different plates, right? As we mentioned, the challenges of labor, water, regulation, all of these different things. And a lot of the times they're growing in different locations. So having a product that is easy to use and fits into their cultural program, right? Those are key. It's got to be plug and play, because if it's not plug and play and they have to do an extra step or purchase new equipment, or there's some type of capital expense that goes along with using a new technology, you see that move to the back burner, and the grower's eye is then directed into a different area where perhaps they could have a cost savings or receive that ROI in a different way. So usability, functionality, and fit, very important.
Thank you. Angela and Pam, you guys have anything to add here? And how do companies like Trilogy to effectively scale its sales?
Well, I think one of the best ways that I've seen succeeded in the past with my past companies is exactly as what's been already said, that you have to have the efficacy data and the science behind it to prove what your company does, what your product does. At the same time, doing grower demos with early adopter, key influencer growers to show how the product works and how it's incorporated into the program compared to their standard program, and the benefits of that are really the way to get adoption. And the more demos you do, the more likely you're going to be able to scale. And that's really critical for early companies to do that.
Yeah. Pam hit on a really, really good point too, that getting your product into the field, letting the growers touch it, feel it, smell it, experience it. The sales cycle in the ag world is much different than it may be in other markets. The seasonality of crops. I like to tell our clients that there's a show me year, a show me again year, and then okay, I'm going to make a small purchase and put it into my commercial program. So a lot of the times it is a 3-year cycle. There's different models in getting to the market as well. You can go through a distribution channel where the manufacturer works with a distributor that would then sell a product to a grower. That way you have perhaps sponsors for your product that are out and touching more growers. So there's some efficiencies that come into that model, but you got to leave some margin in there for the distributor themselves. The direct to grower model is something that is out there. It's often been called the kiss of death for new products coming into the market. Distributors carry a big stick and they influence a lot of acres. So making smart and informed decisions based on the, what do I want to say, the culture of the market that you're going into is important.
Yeah, I'm seeing some early companies will go direct to grower to create the demand so they can excite a distributor to take in the product, because otherwise you won't have any sales. And so that demand creation is kind of fundamental for the company.
So I guess, the key thing is actually how do we quickly get to a tipping point where you don't, initially you have to do a lot of demo, assure the numbers, but, typically the farmers or growers wanted to test for a season or two, right? So that sales cycle is kind of prolonged because of that cycle, but hopefully there's a tipping point where you've done enough and show enough so that the new customers don't have to go through these cycles again, and you can kind of quickly scale sales.
Yeah, that's a nice recap. Having a data package and having it well defined and relatable to the market that you're approaching, that gets you a little further ahead than here's something new, check it out, tell me what you think. I would say that's probably not an efficient way to to approach a market. That is key.
Yeah, it's always great to have a good data package that gets you in the door.
For sure.
Thank you. I mean, it's been a great discussion. I think we have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you, Pam. You've been doing my job. You've been addressing these questions in the Q&A box. But I think for audience who's not here but wanted to listen to the recording, let's just maybe verbally go through these. Pam, I'm afraid I have to ask you to kind of maybe repeat your answers in the Q&A box. So the first question is from Andra. I'm interested in the effect of patent issues on fundraising. Obtaining enforceable international patents on bioengineering ag organisms is very difficult. Could the panel speakers please comment?
Yeah, this is my expertise because I do have over 500 patents to my name, mostly on microbes, and most of them are naturally occurring microbes, not engineered microbes. And it is very difficult to get patents on living microbes, since there was a Supreme Court case called the Myriad case some years ago that made it more difficult. But you can do it if you're showing that you've done something to the microbe that's different from nature. If you isolate it into a fermentation, that is something patentable. If you show that it's producing compounds that are increasing crop growth or pesticidal, that's patentable. Or if you're formulating it, you can patent the formulations. Or if you find a new use for it, or if you combine it with other products, that synergy is patentable. So this kind of IP is very important for fundraising. All the companies I advise and all the VCs I know, really important to have IP behind the product, because it is a very competitive space, and that IP is critical. So you won't have it all at the beginning, but as you grow the company, you will continue to build your patent portfolio.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam, with your personal experience, and this is great. And any other panelists wanted to chime in here? All right, let's move on to the next question. This question is from Kelly. Can you also speak to any changes that will allow more leeway for new technology methodology at the farm level with respect to qualifying for government crop insurance, farm supplements, etc.? Often there are rules limiting new practices when a grower desires to participate in government programs. Pam?
Yeah, I did mention that. Okay, someone's saying my voice is not coming through. I'm surprised at that.
It's better now. I mean, there's been a minute. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of organizations working on this area. And one of them is with Department of Pesticide Regulation and California Department of Food and Ag in California, seeing how we can modify crop insurance in the state for this very topic. But a whole bunch of organizations, especially USDA and RCS, and many NGOs on how can we reduce the increase soil health and reduce the carbon footprint greenhouse gas emissions of agriculture, and by particular practices or outcomes that do that. And the biologicals industry, there's a trade group called the Biological Products Industry Alliance that is working very hard on this, because there's a number of beneficial outcomes from using biologicals. We've mentioned that today, but also increasing biodiversity on the farm, which is one of the benefits, and some NGOs want to pay farmers for that. So it's a work in progress. Farmers are a bit confused by what's available to get payments for, but this is being sorted out over time.
Yeah, and Elisa, Robin, do you guys have any inputs on this question?
No.
I think that, one thing that kind of circles around the whole carbon conversation is a truly effective way to measure change. And I think as we get closer to having a solid technology to measure a little bit more clearly that carbon capture, maybe some of this will also play out.
Thank you very much. There's another question about, I think, the market in Europe. I don't know how many of you actually know the biostimulant market in Europe. Maybe, Angela, anyone who can chime in here. The question is, how is the market situation for biologicals and biostimulants in Europe?
Well, I could comment a little bit, because we do work with someone in the UK, And so that's no longer part of Europe, but sort of. And I'm actually headed there on Sunday to go to farms and fields. And I think the farmers and growers there are a little bit ahead of the US in their experimentation with other, with more biological inputs. The regulation on biostimulants is further ahead. It's at least defined in Europe. So there's more avenues to make claims and approach the market. So, I'm certainly going to learn a lot next week, but I think that the Europeans and the folks in the UK are a year or two ahead of what's going on here in the US in experimenting and adopting some of these practices.
I would agree.
Maybe even further than a year or two ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Angela. I think the regulatory environment in Europe is easier compared to the United States. We don't have a clear category for biostimulants, nor even some of the activities of some of the microbes that we have. Europe does. And so that makes the United States have big problems like products with no category to put them into, or we can't really claim what they actually do. So I would agree with you.
Right. So thank you, Robin and Angela. So does that mean for true algae, European countries are also a big market for you guys?
Oh, yes, for sure. We're, our usual practice outside of the US is to find a licensee to work with us hand in hand in bringing the technology abroad. And so that's part of the work we're doing. We see huge opportunity over there.
Yeah, I would agree. It's for biopesticides, it's very difficult to get products approved, but for biostimulants, because there's a one standard, unlike the US, it's better. And there's quite a biostimulant industry in Europe that's pretty robust, and sales are exceptional right now, because remember, Europe has targets to reduce chemical fertilizers. They've already eliminated a lot of chemical pesticides. So great opportunity for True Algae and other companies to come in because of those fertilizer reduction targets.
Great comments. We still have a couple minutes here. So one thing that came out of our prep call, right, with the panelists, it seems like the panelists knows a little bit about True Algae and True Solan product. Maybe from just a third-party view, Pam or and Lisa and Robin, if you can comment on what are the true future potential for a product like True Solan.
Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I can jump in there. Actually, I think this whole topic of metabolites or small molecules is a big one, and it's not just True Algae. Lots of companies are working with small molecules or metabolites and they normally work as signalers that tell microbes or maybe even the plant what to do. So this is huge. This is going to be a whole new world of agriculture, and particularly manipulating the microbiome or manipulating how the plant is responding. In the case of True Solan, I'll just give you a little bit more information. They used Biomakers technology. So they gene sequenced soil after it was treated so they could see what the signal did and how did that affect the microbiome. And they found through gene sequencing that it's influencing beneficial microbes like trichoderma, mycorrhizae, actinomycetes, fluorescent pseudomonads, and things like that, as well as microbes that make iron available. So the world is kind of endless. When you start talking about signaling molecules, this is what True Solan does, and all of that's extremely useful. I think there'll be a lot more companies that come in that space and try to come up with different kinds of metabolites or small molecules. They're called both things, to try to manipulate crops, plants, and the microbiome.
Boy, I see a lot of companies in the biological space, and despite it being crowded with a lot of new entrants, True Algae has a unique play. The production is unique, the product is unique, and as Robin said, what it does in the soil and to the crop is unique. So there's a good place for those with that kind of unique position, and also getting the data, like through Biomakers, to show what it does.
Well, I have to say, as an investor into algae, we're definitely happy to hear industry experts have these high praises for their products. What I have to, now we're on top of the hour. I can't thank enough to you, all the panelists. Great insights, great discussion. And also, I would hope this session is helpful to the audience, investors, entrepreneurs alike. Hopefully you get something just like me out of this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone. I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you, Lexing.
Thank you.
Thank you.